Hey, this is Notser, and this is the Independence. This is the Tier 6 American Support Aircraft Carrier that was introduced in 13.0 for early access. I'm going to talk about my equipment build and my commander build, and then we're going to showcase a replay and talk about the general tactics that you would use. Now, the Independence has lightly armored ship, 21 on the deck. The Citadel is behind a torpedo protection bulge of only 16 millimeters, so it's pretty lightly armored, but it's a Tier 6 aircraft carrier. You would expect that. For the equipment, this uses torpedo bombers, HE attack aircraft, and then HE dive bombers. They are not like the main American aircraft carrier line. They diverge in a couple ways. The torpedo bombing squadron has a much tighter and quicker aim animation, so it's easier to become 100% accurate versus the main line. The main line is a little bit more shotgunny versus this one, so you might find that you have more success with these torpedo bombers versus the traditional American aircraft carrier line. The torpedo bombers, however, do still suffer from a finite amount of aircraft, whereas the two other squadrons do not suffer from this. That basically means that every single aircraft that's shot down when using the torpedo bombers will reduce the subsequent torpedo bomber squadron sizes. That you obviously want to have large torpedo bomber squadrons when you're going up against an isolated battleship where you're trying to pick on it. And this unit is very good at picking on isolated battleships or isolated heavy cruisers, low maneuvering big vessels. Where it stumbles a little bit is against submarines, small destroyers, or even light cruisers. The size of the ship really is a key for how successful these will be, and it just goes down to torpedoes, active maneuver. Well, you can't hit the torpedoes, so that's one of the things that you got to keep in mind. Now, just because these torpedoes are good against battleships and heavy cruisers does not mean that you're only good against those types. With the tactical squadron, you do not benefit from laying smoke like the Tier 8 or the Tier 10. But it does teach you about the benefits of using this tactical squadron design. So the attack aircraft is high explosive. It is tactical, which means no matter how many aircraft you lose, you will always spawn with a full-size squadron. It's only based on the aircraft preparation time, and this is about 1 minute 30 seconds to prepare another squadron. And it's just like a Soviet squadron. They all attack, or whatever is left from the attacking unit will attack, and then obviously who cares where it goes, because effectively that squadron ceases to be valuable once the payload is delivered. That's the benefit of using a tactical squadron. It allows you to be more aggressive when attacking heavily AA defended units, or maybe a fighter defended unit like an aircraft carrier or a battleship or a patrol fighter. You could effectively attack into that, and as long as you got the animation activated for the attack run, the unit will be immune to any more losses incurred, and it will provide the spotting time for the attack animation, and then whatever rockets land on the target, that'll give you damage, right? So it's nice in targeting aircraft carriers. It's nice for targeting cruisers, especially cruisers. But you can also hit some destroyer players. It does have a 4-second and change attack animation. So when you effectively enter the attack animation, the surface ship will have about 4 seconds of active maneuvering that could potentially throw off, which is a very long duration compared to the mainline American carrier. The mainline American carrier is much quicker, so it's harder to avoid the attack if you've set it up correctly. Whereas with the design that they've chosen with these high explosive attack aircraft, the surface ship that's trying to maneuver will be able to throw off the attack run if they time it correctly. Other things that you might consider, and this is as we're going through these units, all three of these units are a perpendicular attack, which means you need to go towards the broadside of an enemy ship to be the most effective with the attack pattern. That's different because obviously the high explosive dive bombs of the American mainline is parallel to your course. So you have effectively 3 units that all are countered the same way with the Independence, and obviously the Yorktown and the Essex, which is sailing towards the enemy aircraft unit or away from, will effectively make the attack run 50% less effective because it will be the suboptimal direction to come for these units. So that's something that you can keep in mind as a surface ship against the Independence. Now, the final unit, the high explosive bomber, this is not quite a dive bomb. It's not quite a cluster. It's kind of in between a British cluster bomb, carpet bomber, and a American dive bomb. And with it being perpendicular, you do want to approach broadside, which is different compared to the mainline American aircraft carrier, which you want to approach parallel to the opposing ship's course. So perpendicular, but it's a much quicker animation. So it'll hit more faster moving targets like destroyers or maybe even a submarine that doesn't dive quick enough, or a light cruiser, of course. And the battleships and the heavy cruisers will also be vulnerable to this particular unit. And because the attack animation is, I think, like 2 seconds and change, it's much tighter and much harder for the opposing surface ship to actively maneuver away from this attack. Now, one thing that I will say, the HE attack aircraft can be used against heavily armored ships like battleships and heavy cruiser. But it's not going to be optimal, and that 4 or 5 seconds that it spends attacking before actually launching the rockets will effectively drag the battleship big guns into position where now the rockets will fail to do damage. So I haven't seen as much success with the high explosive attack rockets against battleships as the 2 other squad units. For the equipment that you use, air groups, mod 1, typical. Because of the tactical squadron nature, I would not encourage you to enhance the hit points of the tactical squadron, since they are effectively, kind of all-in units. So you don't need to preserve the health pool of these units. So you should really invest all of your efforts to keep your torpedo bombers as healthy as possible, because that is the only aircraft loss that will really destroy your future attack paths. So, something to keep in mind. And then over by the commander, I have tried a couple different builds, and this one seems to work the best overall for the Independence and the Yorktown and every subsequent support carrier for the Americans. And air supremacy, improved engine, aircraft armor, survivability expert. Pretty typical defensive unit. For the 4-point, I choose to go with proximity fuse, 10% off of torpedo protection. Your primary target's a battleship, so that's going to be beneficial. And if it's not a battleship and they don't have any torpedo protection or very little, this will effectively increase the damage just a little bit more, so you feel a little bit more potent. I also choose site stabilization, and that's more for the tactical squadrons. Their gun sights kind of take a long time to become accurate, so this just makes them play more effectively in my mind. I also go pyrotechnician. Without this, the HE component of the Independence don't really set many fires, maybe 1 or 2 per game, but with pyrotechnician kind of doubles that chance, so you're effectively consuming a damage control party or just a % damage on an enemy surface ship. So either way, fire is a good thing. So I just think the 3 points is a good 3-point to pick up in addition to what you've already taken. And then finally, torpedo bomber. arming distance is a little long for the torpedo bombing squadron. So this kind of brings it back into the realm of acceptable. Now, you might go, well, because you can invest in your torpedo, why don't you invest in the torpedo speed? Well, if you invest in torpedo speed, you will effectively make it more challenging to land because the arm time will be even longer and more drawn out. So you don't want too much of an arm time because it is pretty long already. So that's the only caveat there. Now, we're going to go take a look at the game in a replay, and we'll see how well the Independence plays. All right, so this is the replay. It's a 2-carrier match, so a lot of aircraft carrier, a ton of cruisers, 3 destroyers, a token battleship, and a token submarine. And it's all same tier, basically, other than one tier 5. So this is a good measurement of equal tiered ships. And as the Independence, I love to open with the attack aircraft. The attack aircraft are the tactical squadron that are most effective against cruisers, destroyers, and aircraft carriers, actually. So 3 potential targets that I could go after. Meanwhile, it can obviously passively spot battleships, and you can passively spot submarines, but only a submarine that wants to take damage is going to take damage from an attack aircraft carrier squadron. So as we're going towards the opposing side, I'm looking for a cruiser, and I want a broadside cruiser. It takes 4.3 seconds of the attack animation for it to fully go off. So there's a long period where the opposing ship could actively maneuver. So that's the one thing that I have to deal with, is whether the player actively wants to maneuver. So we bump into an enemy cruiser, which is broadside, perfect target, and I immediately engage him. Now we do fall through the flak, but as long as the animation is activated, I will not lose any of the aircraft, and we land 14 rockets for about 8,600 points of damage, which is great. And it's an ideal situation, a broadside cruiser with my attack aircraft. Obviously, the attack aircraft is still on cooldown, so the next one is going to be the tactical squadron dive bombers. These are also, I can afford to lose them into fighters, for example. As long as I can get the attack animation activated, I'll be good. Enemy destroyer is attempting to capture A point, and his teammate is protecting himself with a patrol fighter. So I kind of want to go past and get the enemy cruiser, Degrassi, but it's not really looking like a good opportunity. Now I note that the friendly aircraft carrier squadron drags the patrol fighter, so I'm just going to throw the squadron at the problem. Maybe we can catch sight of him on the opposite side of the smoke cloud, which of course he doesn't, but there were torpedoes inbound. So it's always good to try and combo with a carrier, and especially the support carriers. You don't have a lot of direct damage necessarily, but what you provide is intelligence, obviously, the ability to attack effectively into a well-defended fighter position, which you can't really afford to do quite as the support carriers can. And it's just really important that, you maintain intelligence on the map. And the best way to do that is obviously be out there. So we catch sight of, obviously, the cruiser, Nemo Corsair. He leaves the safety of the smoke. But because of the lack of aim and also the time it takes for the attack to actually occur, he was able to effectively avoid the incoming damage. Now, once again, we scramble our tactical bomber squadron. Still haven't used the torpedo. And we're going to get a broadside on this enemy cruiser. Now, you can see how tight, and by the way, the replay kind of messes with the aim. Where the bombs actually went is actually where I aimed there. And the cruiser obviously was taken out. Ideal scenario, broadside target. And he was low enough that a single attack could knock him out. And the HE dive bomb actually does pretty good. Now, this is the first time you've seen the torpedo bombers scrambled. The torpedo bombers are really good against battleships and heavy cruisers. Not really destroyers, but the Monahan's in a bad situation. I was hoping to try and combo with the cruiser back here. So I really don't care about landing this. I just want to keep a squadron over him, keeping him spotted. But you'll see how much of an arming distance is required on these torpedo squadrons. It effectively makes it's really on the small ship. His ability to just pay attention, it's all on him, whether I land it or not. It's really a long aim time. So I think you will find that if you attempt to use the torpedo bombers like I'm trying to do here, you're probably not going to be as successful as you'd hope. Obviously, using it against a great big battleship or a heavy cruiser, that's different. I would honestly even discourage you necessarily from using it against aircraft carriers just because the tactical squadron design works really well with attacking carriers directly versus the default squadron design that is common on the mainline American carriers. So we are obviously scrambling the aircraft, the attack aircraft, and we're going up against another cruiser. Cruisers are very vulnerable to this, and he's obviously broadside. So we set up a nice broadside aim, really long attack animation, but when it lands, it does a ton of damage. And that's the part that we really like. That same component makes it really good against an aircraft carrier. You can do that exact same lead-in to a fighter-defended carrier, and you can attack with 14 or 15 rockets and do nearly 10,000 points of damage if that carrier takes a couple friendly shots because you've got good detection on him. He might be knocked out of the game. So really good against cruisers and carriers. So we've got a decent... we have a lot of advantages in this match. We have a decent amount of options, though. We have the Fubuki. We could also go after the Molotov. Now, I think, for me, support carriers really should primary finishing off targets that would otherwise not be finished off. And I think the Molotov is the perfect candidate. We can knock him out, then the teammate that is chasing after him can go after someone else. Once again, broadside, the Molotov, if he knew how this unit worked. And it wasn't the best drop as far as accuracy. You know, the Molotov's pretty narrow, so we got 2 bombs, but he's still alive. But if the player understood what the Independence and what the Yorktown and what the Essex are good at, he would sail away or sail towards that squadron. And as people learn how to deal with it, that's what they will ultimately do. Sail towards or away any Independence, Yorktown, or Essex squadron. Enemy Monahan is on approach. I obviously caught sight of him on my ship detection, so it led me to this location. Didn't get the best turn radius there, and I didn't decide to fire on him. But we did keep him spotted for potentially a teammate to scramble squadron or maybe even a DD to come help. Now, obviously, we're losing our squadron, but you know, we're not in any bad situation. Now, I could have dropped a fighter right there over his target, and I should have in that situation. Note, I cannot pop the smoke cloud, which the Yorktown and the Essex will be famous for. This is more teaching you about the concept of the squadron and the dynamics that they share. And, you know, that was a perfect example where a patrol fighter over his head would have been beneficial so that we could have a better understanding of where he's going. Obviously, we're flying over him, so it's not the worst. And the drop speed's pretty quick against a DD. I would say the HE bomber squadron is most effective against a destroyer because the drop speed and the aim speed is so quick. But I can definitely make use of the attack aircraft as well. They have done a good job of damaging, and hopefully we can showcase that here. He's obviously going after the other aircraft carrier. But the aim time's a very difficult situation that you got to overcome. We get roughly in front of where he's going to be, but look at how much time he's got to spend. And we still didn't knock him out. We got 2 rockets on him, but we still didn't knock him out. So not as exciting or appealing of damage as we had hoped. And I actually have to wait on my tactical squadron. So the potential targets nearby: enemy DD, the Monahan; enemy DD, Fubuki; enemy Pensacola, which is AFK. I could call on a torpedo squadron and go after the AFK Pensacola, but I note that the enemy aircraft carrier put a patrol fighter over it. So I would effectively lose a lot of my torpedo squadron. And yes, we have a lot of points. I don't need to be this much of a stickler on this, but I am. So instead, I decide to wait on my tactical and to scramble the first tactical available, which of course is the high explosive dive bomb. And my Douglases are going to head over towards maybe the Fubuki. I would prefer to not go after the Pensacola just because it's an easy target. I want to go after actively maneuvering targets and, showcase how much you could do potentially. So we find out roughly where the Fubuki is. So we're going to try and aim again. Once again, the reticles are not quite as precise as they were in the game themselves. So if we miss and the reticle's right on him, that's because there's a little bit of a desync there. But if we hit, well, then that's exactly where it lands. And we got 3 bombs to land on the Fubuki and do quite a sizable amount of damage. Not bad. So yeah, I feel like the HE bombers, best against DDs, second best against cruisers, third best against battleships, fourth carrier, and then they're actually decent against submarine. They certainly are the best squadron that you can send out. But if a submarine takes damage from a bomber, they really just don't care. Now here is the bread and butter of these attack aircraft. We're going to get a broadside on this enemy aircraft carrier. And because we entered our attack animation, we're effectively immune to the fighter. And we land 15 attack rockets for 9,400 points of damage. So if we could do 1 or 2 more strikes like that, we will combo with the Graf Spee very nicely. So I have either go after the enemy carrier or go after the Pensacola. The Pensacola is a little bit closer, so I'm just going to go after it. It's an AFK player, but it'll give you a chance to see how the drop reticle works against an unmaneuvering target. It'll be a decent amount of damage. I don't expect to kill him, but I expect to do 5k at least. So we obviously fly over and we drop it right on top of him, and it's not quite 5k, a little bit under. So the RNG accuracy leaves a little bit to be desired against more narrow ships, but big ships like carriers and battleships, they really take good damage against the HE dive bomb. The carrier really doesn't want to see attack aircraft because they're going to just eat him up. I would literally kill him if I could get to him in time, and of course can't. So overall, Independence, we got 1 kill this game and we did 44,000 points of damage. Not bad. It's a carrier, and it's pre whatever carrier changes they might bring to the game. We were not top on our team, but we're near the top of contribution. So I'm happy about that. Maybe if we didn't have that failed attempt at attacking the DD with torpedoes and we used that cooldown cycle for maybe damaging that carrier 1 more time with the attack aircraft, it would lead to a second kill and, potentially more XP overall. But, effectively, the Independence does a good job of being different from the main line in enough ways that would encourage different play. Obviously, it doesn't have smoke, so that's not there that you can lean on. But you can lean on the tactical squadrons and the attack aircraft and the dive bomb that set up some nice comboing plays. And that's why I leaned on the fire chance, because they do combo well together. You just get more fires and more fires sticking. So, that's always great. But overall, that's the Independence. Leave in the comments what you think, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.